Hello and welcome to the Being Human podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Bottaro, and today, since this is getting released right before the 4th of July, we are going to talk about the American church, the American way, the Americanism. Wait a minute, Americanism? Did you know that's a heresy? Did you know that Pope Leo the 13th in 1899 wrote about the heresy of Americanism? What the heck is that? Well, I recently learned about this in the last couple of years, and I think it's fascinating. It's so enlightening and opening and mind-opening about what really has implanted itself as a cultural reality and how it could be really problematic. Also, I think in my perspective, things that are really beautiful and wonderful about our culture. But you could obviously see in some ways where Pope Leo's prophetic insight sort of saw things where they could have gone really wrong, or maybe where they were going really wrong. So we're going to open that up today, and we're going to talk about the American church, the American mindset, and what things we really should be looking out for, what things which we should celebrate and be really grateful for. I think there's a lot of beauty that comes out of it as well. I hope this blesses you.
I spent the last 10 years learning how to help people using the best techniques available in psychology integrated with the Catholic faith. Now we've figured out that there's a better way to help people than just slapping a Catholic label on the same secular model of therapy you find anywhere else. The real question is, how will we make this shift to a new model of truly Catholic accompaniment, keeping the psychological sciences in mind while opening up to a more human and more effective approach? This podcast is here to give you the answer. Join me and follow along as I take you behind the scenes of what this new model looks like, using recorded audio from sessions working with my team, with colleagues, and even directly with clients. My name is Dr. Greg Bottaro, and I want to welcome you to the Being Human podcast.
All right, so in 1899, Pope Leo the 13th. By the way, I've heard people talking about Pope Leo the 14th, our current pope. Many people think he took the name because of Pope Leo the 13th's encyclical called Rerum Novarum. And he was really at this time period moving into this real postmodern world. And there's some really important things in that encyclical. We're not going to talk about that right now. But there's this lesser known, which I think is a letter, but I found it on papalencyclicals.net. So that's why I keep calling it an encyclical here. But I think, he wrote this to talk about what he calls Americanism. It says, concerning new opinions, virtue, nature, and grace with regard to Americanism. And he was pretty concerned about the things that were developing in American culture and American mindset. And so, I wanted to open up a few of those ideas of what he was concerned about, what he saw happening, and also talk about it in context of the possible positive direction that these characteristics might take. Because, as in all things characteristic, there's the qualities that can maybe go in a direction that's positive or a direction that's negative. So, just to kind of summarize, he certainly pointed out doctrinal relativism. And by the way, this letter is called Testem Benevolentiae Nostrae. And it really gets into this postmodern relativism. So applied specifically to doctrine, he saw that there was a lot of compromise and relativism. I'd be really curious to know in the actual church in that time if there was something specific about America that was standing out in contrast to what was happening in Europe. And I guess what the story goes that there are a lot of these trends and a lot of these things that start in America and then find their way. So at that point in time, there was still a lot of cultural, traditional respect and reverence that Pope Leo XIII saw beginning to be disintegrated in the American culture. Excessive liberty in individual liberty in spiritual matters. So really taking matters into one's own hand, not only about doctrine, but also in spiritual matters. So that, this idea of following your own mind, following your own path, your own truth, that there was this idea that, that's a fundamentally American ideal that began. And, it's just so fascinating to think about this. I mean, the older I get and the more I sort of see things in the world and culture and society, and we have wars that break out, and I think about revolting against the government, and what that would have meant. And thinking back to the time period and, to the 18th century and what our founding fathers accomplished. I mean, it's so radical. It's revolutionary. And, I mean, just to think about what kind of mindset that took to have the ideas that this could be done and to have such passion. And, this is not a political commentary. This is not even really a historical. We're certainly not plumbing the depths of the historical context for the founding of our country here. But just to say, the older I get, the more I appreciate how complex that revolutionary, radical move really is. And for that to happen, and then to be successful, has the power to transform the whole world. Not even because it's anything, special about the American people or this American the people on this continent and what, in this country, what we specifically bring to the table. But it's like, when communism, when there's revolution that happens, and then these places, I mean, it all falls apart eventually. If people are looking around and paying attention, it's like, yeah, don't do that. That way, that revolt never really went anywhere, or that just got crushed, or that doesn't work. But there were certain ideals embedded within the American project and experiment that worked. And when it works, it gives greater confidence in the revolution itself. And it gives greater confidence in the idea of testing the limits of what has been passed on. And it's incredible when it works. So when a revolution works and then becomes successful and grows, and it's like, this is powerful. In the 18th century, when these things were brewing and then exploding, and then go into the 18th to the 19th century, in the 1800s, I bet a lot of the world is kind of holding its breath. It's like, is this really going to pan out? Is this going to work? By the time you get to 1899, it's like, whoa, there's incredible innovation and invention. And also, we'll talk about this. Even the church itself is planting roots and growing, and we have saints emerging in the church. And it's like, wow, it gives new hope, and it shines a new light on this idea of individualism, of revolting against the sort of masses and the traditions that have been passed down. That's dangerous. And there's going to be a positive and a negative consequence to that. So obviously all the beautiful things that we were able to accomplish and experience and achieve are the positive consequences of that. Stepping apart, stepping out of structures that maybe are not healthy and centered on the person and the good and the dignity of the person. But then the mindset itself, when applied to other structures that are passed down by quote unquote tradition or quote unquote patriarchy, the dirty word that makes all the liberals shudder. It's like, well, wait a minute. Is everything bad that's been passed down? Is everything bad that comes from structures of understanding? Even the fact that there might be different strengths and geniuses of men and women, of ideas that are being passed down in these structures, is it all bad? Well, obviously, in the tradition of the church, we would say no, it's not all bad. And in fact, if we start to doubt everything because it's been passed down without taking a deeper dive look at what's really going on, then we are in deep error, and we throw away the baby with the bathwater. And so, even taking an idea of like patriarchy, it's like, well, what, are there elements of misogyny? Are there elements of a lack of dignity, a lack of mutual respect that need to be healed and corrected? Absolutely. I've got plenty of episodes of this podcast talking about that. But then the whole structure gets thrown out, and everything else that we've come to see, the role of man and the respect and dignity given to man, also being thrown out. And it's like, well, now we've gone too far. And that word just means basically that men are bad. Well, okay, so that's another example. But, things of tradition, things of the church, the teachings, the doctrine of the church, and the spiritual guidance that comes through the church also should not be thrown away. And so, yeah, it's good to have a spiritual director. It's good to have spiritual guides. It's good to go looking for something outside of yourself to help you make your path and find your way. All right, so another point in here is overemphasis on natural virtue. And so there was this idea of the activism of the American work ethic. And so a lot of times there's this unwarranted importance on the just the natural grit that we find inside of ourselves. And somehow, if we just try hard and we do our best and we just have that natural human goodness, and it doesn't matter if you're religious, it doesn't matter if you are Christian, if you're a good person and you work hard and you try hard and you do your best, that's the American way. And it kind of misses the point. Now, in a lot of these issues that he brings up in this, again, it's like this, there's always going to be this both and I find that we see these characteristics that are really pointing us in our language more towards, where do we find the distinctions to add to the mystery, which is what the both and is all about. So, are we saying then that active virtues, natural virtues, hard work, a good work ethic are bad? No, of course not. What we're saying is that there's more to it. And in fact, we get really beautiful articulation in the fact that grace perfects nature. So we have to start off with nature. That's the thing we find in ourselves. That's the whole point of God becoming man. He enters into the humanity that we have, and then he's going to help us take our humanity through him if we acknowledge and accept him, and we enter into that pathway to the divine, the supernatural, the spiritual. And so we have these, this capacity in our natural life, in our human substance that we're starting from, to be open to the sort of more spiritual virtues that we receive through grace. But there's this sort of distinction between those two things and then an overemphasis on the natural, the active, the sort of this is what we can do. This is, if we grin and bear it, this is what we're able to accomplish. And I do think that this is something that we've inherited, and as Americans, we can be over the top when it comes to this. It's so funny traveling around, learning about different cultures in different parts of the world, and you realize that, other places on the planet, other people, other cultures are, they take more holiday, vacation time. They take more time for leisure. They take more time with their families. There's space to appreciate not working a lot more. Now, we can get into some other sides of that where, there's a certain sense of American ingenuity that comes from our economic system that is really positive as well. And so again, same thing. We can look at it in two lenses. It could be a both and. But we have to be cautious. No matter what we're able to accomplish by our own, bootstrapping, pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps, and having the startup entrepreneurial cultural mindset, where there's a will, there's a way. These are so American. And again, all the goodness that comes out of that, we also have to be really careful that it doesn't nurture a mindset that it's all up to us. I love coming back to Padre Pio. It's so simple, but we have to work as if it depends on us and pray as if it depends on God. And that principle can basically be applied to anything. And I think it's a both and. If you only work as if it depends on you, you are falling prey to this heresy of Americanism. There's also that he spoke about a contempt for religious life and vows. This is really interesting. I think being a sort of citizen of America in the 21st century, it feels to me a lot like just normal pop culture and contemporary culture. But again, at the time of, at the brink of the 20th century, coming out of the 19th century, Pope Leo XIII saw that this was, something emerging out of America, and it was spreading. It's so interesting to think about how, we talk about Our Lady of Fatima, and she warned against the errors of Russia spreading its lies across the world. And Pope Leo XIII here was already warning about, some of these lies and errors of America started, and seeing maybe that they were going to be spreading across the world. Now, again, I don't think there's no way that this is all coming down to America's fault, that we have a contemporary culture now across the world of relativism, of secularism, of moving away from traditional religious Christendom kind of appreciation for religious life, for the priesthood, for the church. I think that's a global phenomenon. But it's, again, just really interesting that he saw it happening here and wanting to point this out as something to, to really speak out against. And if nothing else, I think he's also here seeing the beautiful opportunity of the new experiment of America and realizing, well, this is an opportunity to get it right. Maybe because we are disengaging from so many of these embedded errors of tradition, lowercase t, that's been passed down through the culture, then, we have an opportunity to do it right. And so, for instance, here's an example of something that Father Columba talked about at our summit of integration. And we'll put a link here if that's still available to access. But he had an awesome talk about Jansenism, and especially in Ireland. And then we followed it up talking about it in France. Obviously, that was around that same exact time that he was writing about the Americanism. Pope Leo XIII was pointing this out, in France and in Ireland and in other places, Jansenism was passing down a tradition of scrupulosity, of rigorism, of things that were really unhealthy in the tradition. And so I can only imagine seeing this new opportunity, like, okay, that's not happening here. Maybe there was some of that in some of the Puritanism that was here, but still, within the Catholic Church, that's not what was marking the American church experience. And so that's a great opportunity to be free from some of those Protestant distortions, and as they sort of took hold in the European church. And but here's the danger. It's like, but don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. It's another both and. It's another mystery here. We have to hold together the integration of what is good in tradition that we are taking and what is not good from previous generations that we can leave behind. And that's a distinction of maturity and self-awareness and spiritual growth that marks every time and place in all of history. And we see that in all of the saints as we look across the whole spectrum. And when we look at the major founders, the great saints of our history, there's a lot of revolutionaries in the church. And every time we can see that is what marks a holy and virtuous revolutionary, is to be able to hold on to that which is good and leave behind that which is bad and start afresh, to be able to break free from the bondage, the chains that are holding us together because that's the way it's always been done. And just taking it on with that pressure and expectation that comes from the previous generation. And it could be parents, it could be the government structures, it could be the church culture that you're born into, whatever it is. At some point, we start questioning things. It's like, all right, is that all good? But it takes maturity to say, some of it's still good, even though maybe I want to leave some of it behind. As an aside, here's a connection I wasn't planning on making, but this is what we do with marriage prep. We train young couples to create. We tell each person, write out your family rule book, which is like the set of either spoken, usually unspoken rules of what it is to be in the family. What do you do around holidays? How do you greet each other in the morning? How do you keep your house? What is your attitude towards guests? What is your attitude towards vacation? I mean, on and on and on. You could write out all the rules that you've been sort of given that we inherit. Because when you get married, you have to create a new rule book. And so you want each spouse to think about the rules they've inherited, and there's some that you're going to want to let go of. But there's also some that you might want to hold on to. And then you have a really explicit, intentional conversation to verbalize those things. And you start off writing out the new rule book for your new family, which will hopefully contain threads of healthy, positive, beautiful rules that have been passed down, those rituals and sort of cultural experiences that are particular to that family. And meanwhile, and then sometimes you got to have a little compromise and discussion. If two happen to be really directly opposed to each other, then figure out which path to take or how to make that compromise. And that's how we move forward. So same thing. Every revolutionary has to think about, what am I taking with me? What am I leaving behind? What's this new thing we're doing? And that's what we had to do as a country. And we had to take certain things that were very clearly part of culture from England, from what we left behind. But then we wanted to leave some things behind and start new and start fresh. And in some ways, Pope Leo XIII saw, well, maybe we're leaving behind too many things that come from the church. And the Catholics who are here need to be alert and attentive to not letting too much be left behind when it comes to tradition and doctrine and spiritual reverence for having spiritual guides and these ideas of religious life and these religious structures. So those are some of the things that are pointed out in this document. Testem benevolentiae nostrae, in terms of concerns about Americanism. There are certain places in this writing where he talks about these, noble national qualities. He doesn't really flesh that out too much. He kind of just acknowledges that if there's something that's particular to a country's cultural mindset that's not harmful, then of course there's specifically a place for having a national mindset, and he wants to just acknowledge that. Okay, thanks for throwing us a bone there, Pope Leo the 13th. But what does that actually look like? I think there's, again, I've kind of alluded to this with some of the founders, the revolutionaries in our church. There's something really beautiful about that mindset. And if we get into, just thinking about some of the great founders and the missionaries and the people, the saints of our church, there are, this I pulled from, this is from my AI assistant, there are 11 canonized American saints. So I have not verified the number or these actual saints. I know these are all saints, but I don't know if I'm missing anybody on this list. Some of them I haven't really heard too much about. And this is loosely American. So, for instance, anyway, I'll get into this list. But we have St. Frances Xavier Cabrini. And she was the first United States citizen to be canonized. She's the patron saint of immigrants. She was born in Italy. But she was actually a U.S. citizen. She became a U.S. citizen, so that counts. We'll count it. Of course, we'll count it, and many places do. Saint Elizabeth Ann Seton, and she was the first American-born saint, and so she is a pioneer of Catholic education. I mean, she really did have that American ideal mindset. She founded the Sisters of Charity, and she started a whole bunch of Catholic schools in America. Saint John Newman was a missionary and the fourth bishop of Philadelphia. He founded the first diocesan Catholic school. He was actually born in Bohemia in Czech Republic, but he served as the Bishop of Philadelphia, so he was canonized in 1977. Again, not American-born, but he's certainly obviously counted as an American saint. We have Saint Rose Philippine Duquesne. She was born in France. She was French, but she was a missionary to Native Americans and also established schools here. St. Catherine Drexel, she founded schools for African Americans and 50 mission schools for Native Americans as well. She was born in Philadelphia. St. Mother Theodore Guerin was canonized in 2006, and she's the patron saint of Indianapolis. She was born in France. Then we have the North American martyrs, and so this is listing 3 of the French Jesuit missionaries. So again, worked in and were martyred here. Saint Isaac Jogues, Saint René Goupil, and Saint Jean de Lalande. We have St. Damien of Molokai, who was born in Belgium, but worked in Hawaii. And so he served a leper colony there and was canonized in 2009. We have St. Marianne Cope, born in Germany, but raised in New York. She died in 1918 and also served in the leper colony in Hawaii alongside St. Damien. Then we have St. Kateri Tekakwitha, who... she was the first Native American canonized by the Catholic Church. She's known as the Lily of the Mohawks and the patron saint of ecology and the environment, canonized in 2012. And last on this list is Saint Junipero Serra, born in Spain, but founded the California Mission System, and it was canonized in 2015. There are so many of these missionary-hearted, in like that American ideal of just like get out there and do it, that work ethic. There's incredibly hard workers here. Being a business owner and a founder, an entrepreneur, studying these saints is an incredible masterclass in how to, manage large teams, to scale things that are bigger than, the movie on Cabrini was so awesome. If you haven't seen the recent Cabrini movie, it's really, really wonderful. But it shows this incredible ingenuity. And again, she was Italian, but she really kind of embodied that American spirit that I think Pope Leo XIII was warning about here. But we could see that when those qualities are given over to God, baptized, redeemed by God, and put into use, into service of the church, such incredible things happen. I want to add another one to the list here who's a servant of God, another Native American, Nicholas Black Elk, who his cause was started in Rapid City, South Dakota in 2016. And I just love how with St. Kateri Tekakwitha, just a real understanding of the land, this country and the land here. It's the place, not just the American identity of the country that was, founded on Independence Day, July 4th, 1776. But actually, it's the place. And there's something so important about the place. And obviously that was something obviously more important in the Old Testament, and there's the place of Jerusalem, of Israel, and in the New Covenant, we go out to all the nations, and it's all the places across the whole planet. God owns it all. It's all his. His kingdom is to be taken up by everything in this world. But there's still something really remarkably important about the place. And I just think we don't necessarily appreciate that enough. But if we think about these, quote unquote American saints, they're not all American by blood or by birth, but they've all affected this place and been affected by this place. And so as we celebrate the independence of the United States of America, I just think that we need to really drink in deeply the work of God in this creation of a cultural identity here that in some ways is maybe dangerous and certainly needs to be warned against and can be, sort of admonished and safeguards created around, but also in many ways that we can praise God for, that we can see God's hand in and his work, and we can realize that it's bigger than the Declaration of Independence. It's bigger than a document. It's bigger than a government. It's about God going out to all nations, to being in many places across the globe, and recognizing that we want to dig deep in drinking in and appreciating the cultural treasures that are in each of these places across the planet. And not because America is the best place on earth, but it is a beautiful place on earth. And it has treasures here to appreciate, to learn from, to grow in. And as we engage in larger international dialogue, as the internet has made us all more accessible to each other, travel has become easier, AI has made learning about each other even more accessible. These beautiful opportunities have emerged to share the goodness of other countries and other cultures and other land, other places. I think we have a lot more work to go. I know we have a lot more work to go, but it's this both and, and again, this is another thing, like I think a lot of the sort of postmodern, relativistic, and now progressively liberal culture, it's almost this overemphasis on these things that are sort of foreign and esoteric. And, it's like this fascination with Eastern New Age spirituality. But it's like, wait a minute. Okay, is there something really beautiful to appreciate about the East? in general? Yes, of course. Of different cultures, even non-Christian expressions of family and culture and faith and the ways they experience their humanity. Yes, absolutely. But not at the expense of our own. And so the only way to truly enter in deeply to dialogue and relationship and collaboration and sharing of and leading towards fruitfulness, where two become one, and because of the one there is fruit born, which is a Trinitarian communio that is built into our anthropology. It's built into our world. It's only by being who you are before entering into the communion with the other. So, to my fellow American brother and sisters, Catholics, Christians, non-Christians, everyone else, let's take this time right now to really deeply appreciate some of the marks of our culture that make us who we are, which means being on guard against the way that those characteristics can become detriment, and also seeing the beauty and the possibilities and the gifts that those characteristics bring us in, especially when applied to a vocation of holiness and growing closer to God through union with Christ. And then in that way, we can totally and fully embrace our identity and who we are as we offer it to the world in dialogue and be able to receive from others, taking from other cultures, other ideas, and embedding within and drinking that in and letting that be a sort of further fleshing out of humanity that's already grounded on who we actually are as a starting point. So, happy 4th of July, happy American identity, happy independence, but bigger than that and deeper than that, and most importantly, happy Christianity Day, happy Freedom Day, happy appreciation of all that we are and all that we're called to become. God bless you.
Thanks for listening to the Being Human podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to help us spread the word and hear more, please head over to iTunes, leave us a review, and subscribe, as it really helps us to get our content out to more people. Be sure to listen next time as I take you deeper into what it means to be human. If you want more free content and information about what we do at the Catholic Psych Institute, head on over to CatholicPsych.com. God bless you.